The war room smelled like ozone and fear. 7 species sat around the metal table, each representative trying to look more dangerous than the others. General Tov's scales caught the harsh lights as he leaned back in his chair. His yellow eyes moved slowly across the room, studying each face like a predator choosing prey. "We must know what we are working with," Tov said, his voice a low rumble that made the walls vibrate. "Each species brings different strengths to this mission. My people have natural armor and can survive direct plasma hits." He tapped his thick chest with a clawed hand. "In the last war, I personally killed 47 enemies with my bare hands alone." Captain Nira ruffled her silver feathers and clicked her beak twice. "Impressive for a ground fighter," she said, her voice sharp and quick like breaking glass. "But aerial combat requires different skills. My squadron destroyed 3 enemy ships in the Battle of the Twin Suns. I have 82 confirmed kills from my fighter craft. Speed and precision matter more than brute strength." Lieutenant Rex's compound eyes turned toward the others. His insect-like head tilted as he spoke through his translator. "Both approaches have merit, but tactical planning wins wars. My analysis led to the capture of enemy strongholds without losing a single soldier. 13 major victories through superior strategy. Sometimes the best kill is the one you never have to make." Commander Hale watched the exchange with tired eyes. 20 years of these meetings had taught him that alien species loved to measure themselves against each other. It was always the same dance. Each one claimed their way of fighting was the best. Each one had stories of glorious battles and perfect victories. "What about your human?" General Tov turned his massive head toward the quiet figure at the end of the table. "We hear many stories about human warriors. Some say they are weak, others claim they are monsters. Which is true?" Staff Sergeant David Cross had been sitting perfectly still during the entire conversation. His hands rested flat on the table. His brown eyes stared straight ahead without blinking. He wore the same gray uniform as Commander Hale, but somehow it looked different on him. More worn. More real. "David has extensive combat experience," Commander Hale said carefully. 15 years of active duty across multiple theaters. He has seen more action than most soldiers see in their entire careers. But what are his numbers? Captain Nira's head jerked forward. "How many enemies has he killed? What weapons does he prefer? We need facts, not stories." The room went quiet. All eyes turned to Cross. He had not moved during the entire meeting. His breathing was slow and steady. His face showed no emotion at all. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his lips curved upward in a small smile. It was not a happy smile. 'Twas the kind of smile that made smart people take a step backward. "With weapons or without?" Cross asked. The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. General Tov's scales shifted color slightly. Captain Nira's feathers pressed flat against her neck. Lieutenant Rex's antennae twitched nervously. "I do not understand," General Tov said slowly. "What kind of question is that?" Cross leaned forward just an inch. The small movement made everyone else unconsciously lean back. "You asked about my kill count. But you did not specify which kind of kills you wanted to know about, so I am asking you to be more clear. Do you want to know about enemies I killed with weapons or enemies I killed without weapons?" Commander Hale closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. He had hoped this moment would never come. He had hoped the other species would never ask directly about human combat statistics. Some things were better left unknown. "There is a difference?" Captain Nira's voice was smaller now. Less confident. "Oh yes," Cross said. His voice was calm and quiet, like a teacher explaining something simple to children. "There is a very big difference. Different situations call for different approaches. Sometimes you have a rifle. Sometimes you have a knife. Sometimes you have a rock. Sometimes you have nothing but your hands and your brain." Lieutenant Rex's translator made a clicking sound. "And you have killed with all of these methods?" "Among others." Cross folded his hands together. "Human soldiers are trained to adapt. We use whatever works, whatever is available, whatever gets the job done and gets us home alive." The silence stretched longer this time. General Tov's claws scratched against the metal table. The sound was like fingernails on glass. "Perhaps," Commander Hale said quietly, "we should focus on the mission parameters instead of personal combat records." "No." General Tov's voice was firm. "I want to know. We are about to enter combat together. I need to understand what kind of warrior this human is." "Answer the question, Cross, both numbers." Cross looked at each face around the table. He studied them the same way they had been studying each other earlier. But his gaze was different. It was not the look of someone trying to impress others. It was the look of someone deciding how much truth they could handle. "Very well," he said. "With weapons, I have 247 confirmed kills. This includes rifles, pistols, grenades, rocket launchers, plasma cannons, and various alien weapon systems I learned to use during combat. I am qualified expert on 32 different weapon platforms from 7 different species." Captain Nira made a small sound like air escaping from a balloon. 247 was more than triple her own count. "And without weapons?" Lieutenant Rex asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Cross was quiet for a few seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was even softer than before. 89 confirmed kills with improvised weapons. 34 with no weapons at all. Just hands. The numbers hit the room like a physical force. General Tov, who had been so proud of his 47 hand-to-hand kills, stared at Cross with new understanding. This small human, who looked so ordinary and quiet, had killed more enemies with his bare hands than most warriors killed in their entire careers with proper weapons. "But that is not the full picture," Cross continued. "Those numbers only count direct combat kills. They do not count the other kind." "What other kind?" Commander Hale asked, though his expression suggested he did not want to know the answer. Cross's smile returned. It was even less pleasant than before. "The enemies who surrendered when they learned I was coming. The ones who retreated without fighting. The ones who decided negotiation was better than battle." He paused. "Those numbers are much higher." The room fell into complete silence. Outside the windows, stars moved slowly past as the space station continued its orbit. Inside, 7 species sat around a table, and 6 of them were beginning to understand why the 7th had become the most feared warriors in the galaxy. General Tov's claws drummed against the table in a nervous rhythm. The sound echoed through the war room like distant thunder. His yellow eyes had not left Cross since the human revealed his kill count. 247 with weapons. The number seemed impossible for such a small creature. "Show us," Tov said finally. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed, but there was something else in it now. Something that might have been respect. Or fear. Cross reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. The holographic projector hummed to life, filling the air above the table with swirling light. Images formed and dissolved as Cross scrolled through files marked with red security warnings. "Arid 9, Cross said simply. "Desert world. 3 suns. No water for 600 miles in any direction." The hologram showed a wasteland of red sand and black rocks. The heat shimmer made everything look like it was melting. In the distance, enemy fortifications squatted like metal spiders against the burning horizon. My unit was pinned down for 18 hours. Standard human weapons were overheating in the climate, barrels warping, electronics failing. Cross touched the controls and the image zoomed in on a pile of twisted metal. "So I borrowed this." The hologram displayed what looked like a cannon crossed with a crystal formation. Strange symbols covered its surface, and it hummed with internal energy that made the air around it glow purple. Captain Nira leaned forward, her feathers rustling. "That is a thermal lance. Those are designed for our physiology only. The neural interface requires specific brain patterns to operate." "How did you make it work?" "I watched your soldiers use it for 30 minutes, Cross said. "Figured out the pattern. Modified the grip for human hands using spare metal from our damaged equipment. Rewired the neural interface to respond to electrical impulses instead of your natural biofields." He paused the recording on an image of the weapon firing. The beam of light it produced could have melted through a mountain. 17 kills with that weapon before it burned out. Lieutenant Rex's compound eyes reflected the holographic light in 100 tiny rainbows. "You modified alien technology and combat conditions without training or documentation?" "Standard procedure," Cross replied as if discussing the weather. "Human soldiers are taught basic engineering and electronics. When your life depends on making things work, you learn fast or you die." The hologram shifted to show a jungle world where massive trees blocked out the sky. Everything was green and alive and trying to kill anything that moved. Vines hung like snares, and flowers the size of dinner plates snapped at passing insects. "Verdant 3, Cross continued. "Jungle warfare against insect colonies. Their warriors were 8 feet tall with natural armor plating. My rifle rounds bounced off them like raindrops." The image showed Cross crouched behind a fallen tree, examining a strange weapon that looked like it was grown rather than built. Organic curves and living tissue made up most of its structure, and it pulsed with a heartbeat-like rhythm. Bio-rifle from a fallen enemy. Fires living ammunition that eats through armor. Cross manipulated the controls, showing how he had stripped away alien components and rebuilt the firing mechanism. Problem was, it was designed for creatures with 4 arms and completely different muscle structure. So I made some adjustments. The recording showed Cross welding human weapon components to the alien bio-rifle. He worked quickly and efficiently as if he had done this 1,000 times before. In the background, enemy soldiers could be heard closing in, their chittering calls growing louder. 31 kills with that hybrid weapon, Cross said. Would have been more, but it started growing into my arm after 6 hours. Had to cut it off before it consumed me completely. General Tov made a sound like rocks grinding together. You attached a living weapon to your body? Temporarily, Cross said. It was effective while it lasted. The bio-rifle learned human targeting preferences and improved its accuracy with each shot. By the end, it was hitting targets I could not even see. The hologram changed again, this time showing a world of ice and metal where the sky was black and the ground glowed with frozen starlight. Structures that looked like they were carved from single blocks of ice stretched into the darkness. Frozen 12. Ice Moon. Enemy had energy shields that stopped all projectile weapons. Plasma, particle beams, kinetic rounds. Nothing got through. Cross highlighted a section of the recording that showed shimmering barriers of light protecting enemy positions. But they had never seen human ingenuity combined with alien technology. The image showed Cross working with what appeared to be chunks of ice. But the scanner readings revealed they were actually crystallized energy formations. He was shaping them with tools that glowed hot enough to cut metal, forming them into precise geometric patterns. Resonance crystals from their own defense systems, Cross explained. I harvested them from damaged shield generators and weaponized them. When properly tuned, they create harmonic frequencies that disrupt energy barriers from the inside out. Captain Nira's beak clicked rapidly. That should be impossible. Resonance crystals require quantum-level precision to modify. The slightest error causes catastrophic feedback that can destroy everything within a mile radius. I was very careful, Cross said with that same unsettling smile. Watched their technicians work on shield maintenance for 2 days before attempting modifications. Human hands are steadier than most species realize, and human brains are very good at understanding patterns, even alien ones. The hologram showed the results of his work. Crystalline projectiles that passed through energy shields like they were not there, striking targets on the other side with devastating effect. The enemy's impenetrable fortress became a trap, with their own defenses turned against them. 43 kills using modified resonance crystals, Cross said, plus another dozen when their main shield generator overloaded and took out half their base. The room was completely silent now. The 3 alien commanders stared at the holographic display with expressions of growing unease. They were beginning to understand that humans did not just use weapons. They made weapons out of anything they could find. They turned enemy technology against itself. They learned faster than should be possible and adapted in ways that defied logic. How long does it take you to master a new weapon system? Lieutenant Rex asked. His translator was working harder now, struggling to convey the emotional undertones in his voice. Cross shrugged. Depends on the complexity. Simple beam weapons, maybe an hour. Complex systems with multiple functions, half a day. Living weapons or quantum-based technology can take up to a week. A week, General Tov repeated slowly. My soldiers trained for years to achieve basic proficiency with their primary weapons. Different approaches, Cross said diplomatically. Your soldiers specialize in perfecting specific techniques. Human soldiers are trained to be adaptable. We learn enough about everything to stay alive. Then we figure out the rest as we go. The holographic display flickered and went dark. Cross put the projector back in his jacket and folded his hands on the table. The casual gesture somehow seemed more threatening than any weapon he had just shown them. 247 confirmed kills with weapons, he repeated quietly. But that is the easy part of warfare. Anyone can kill with proper equipment. The real test of a soldier comes when the weapons run out. Commander Hale cleared his throat. Perhaps we should move on to discussing mission parameters. No, Captain Nira said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to hear about the other numbers. The 89 improvised kills. Cross looked at her for a long moment. Then his smile returned, even less pleasant than before. Are you sure? He asked. Once you understand how humans really fight, you cannot forget it, and you might sleep less soundly at night, knowing what your allies are capable of. The three alien commanders exchanged glances. Fear and fascination warred in their expressions. They were intelligent beings who had survived long enough to reach high military rank. They understood that knowledge could be dangerous, but they also understood that ignorance could be deadly. The maintenance tunnels beneath Mining Colony 7 stretched for miles in every direction. Cross had been crawling through them for 6 hours, following emergency lighting that flickered like dying stars. His rifle had run out of ammunition 3 levels up. His sidearm had jammed when he fell through a damaged floor grate. Now he moved through the darkness with nothing but his hands and whatever he could find. The holographic projector showed the alien commanders what Cross had seen that day. Narrow metal passages filled with pipes, cables, and the constant drip of recycled water. The colony had been under siege for 2 weeks. The enemy had cut off all supply lines and was systematically working their way through the facility. Floor by floor, improvised weapons, Cross said, his voice cutting through the silence of the war room. 89 confirmed kills using items that were never designed to harm anyone. General Tov's scales had shifted to a darker shade of green. He was trying to look composed, but his breathing had become shallow. What kind of items? The hologram zoomed in on Cross's hands as he worked in the tunnel. He was holding something that looked like a water purification filter, but he was taking it apart with practiced movements. Internal components came loose, revealing coils of metal wire and small cylindrical objects that hummed with stored energy. Water recycling systems contain pressure regulators, Cross explained. When you remove the safety mechanisms and reverse the flow direction, they become projectile launchers. Not very accurate, but effective at close range. The recording showed Cross testing his improvised weapon. A burst of superheated steam and metal fragments erupted from the modified device, punching holes through a metal wall panel 20 feet away. 5 kills with water system components, Cross said matter-of-factly. Would have been more, but the third shot ruptured a coolant line and flooded the tunnel. Had to move to a different section. Captain Nira's feathers were pressed so flat against her body that she looked like a different species entirely. You turned life support equipment into weapons. Everything is a weapon if you understand how it works, Cross replied. Humans are taught to see the potential in any object. We look at a room and automatically catalog what could be used for offense, defense, or escape. The hologram shifted to show Cross in what appeared to be a kitchen area. Pots and pans hung from hooks and preparation counters lined the walls. But Cross was not looking at the cooking equipment. He was studying the industrial food processors. Colony cafeteria, Cross said. Enemy soldiers were using it as a staging area. They thought they were safe because it was just a place where food was prepared. The recording showed Cross working with a large machine designed for slicing vegetables, but in his hands it became something else entirely. He removed the safety guards, rewired the motor controls, and modified the cutting blades with fragments of broken metal he found scattered around the room. Food processors have very powerful motors, Cross explained to his increasingly disturbed audience. And when you remove the containment housing, those spinning blades become quite dangerous to anything that gets too close. The hologram showed the results. Cross had turned an innocent kitchen appliance into a weapon that could cut through armor plating. Enemy soldiers who thought they were entering a harmless food preparation area found themselves facing something that belonged in a horror story. 12 kills with modified food preparation equipment, Cross said, plus several more who were too wounded to continue fighting and retreated. Lieutenant Rex made a sound like static electricity. His compound eyes were reflecting the holographic light in patterns that suggested extreme agitation. You weaponized their food supply. I weaponized everything, Cross corrected. Food processors, waste disposal units, atmospheric recyclers, gravity generators. Any technology can be turned against its users if you understand the underlying principles. The scene changed to show Cross in a workshop area filled with construction tools. But again, he was not using them for their intended purpose. He was studying a welding torch with the same intensity that other soldiers might study a rifle. Construction equipment makes excellent weapons, Cross said, especially when enemies do not expect it. They see a worker with tools and assume he is not a threat. The hologram showed Cross attaching industrial welding equipment to a mobility frame designed for moving heavy machinery. The result looked like something from an engineer's nightmare. A mobile platform that could cut through solid steel at a distance of 50 feet. Industrial welding torches can slice through most armor, Cross explained. The trick is mounting them on something that can move and aim independently. Construction robots have the right kind of articulated joints, and their power supplies are more than adequate. The recording showed Cross piloting his improvised war machine through the colony's corridors. Enemy soldiers scattered when they saw him coming, but their retreat routes had been cut off by previous modifications he had made to the facility's layout. 19 kills with construction equipment turned into mobile weapons platforms, Cross said. And that was just in one afternoon. General Tov was gripping the table so hard that his claws were leaving scratch marks in the metal surface. How do you think of these things? Training, Cross said simply, but also instinct. Humans evolved as tool users. We see everything in terms of how it could be modified, improved, or repurposed. Give a human any object, and within minutes they will figure out 3 different ways to use it as a weapon. The hologram shifted to show Cross in what looked like a medical facility. Clean white walls, sterile equipment, and the soft hum of life support systems. But even here, surrounded by devices meant to heal and preserve life, Cross was finding ways to create death. Medical equipment, Cross said, anticipating their question. Some of the most sophisticated technology in any facility, and most of it operates by manipulating the human body at the cellular level. The recording showed Cross working with a surgical laser, but instead of the precise low-power beam used for medical procedures, he was modifying the output controls to produce something far more dangerous. Surgical lasers are designed to cut tissue with extreme precision, Cross explained. But if you bypass the safety limiters and redirect the cooling systems, they can cut through much more than tissue. Captain Nira made a small choking sound. You turned medical equipment into torture devices. I turned medical equipment into survival tools, Cross corrected. The enemy was using wounded colonists as shields, thinking we would not fire on a medical facility. They were wrong about what humans will do to protect innocent people. The hologram showed the results. Cross moving through the medical facility like a surgeon performing an operation, but instead of healing, he was systematically eliminating enemy soldiers with tools designed to save lives. The precision was terrifying. Each movement was calculated, efficient, and utterly without mercy. 27 kills with modified medical equipment, Cross said. All enemy combatants. 0 civilian casualties. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the space station's life support systems. The irony was not lost on anyone present. They were surrounded by the same kind of equipment that Cross had just demonstrated could be turned into weapons, with a few simple modifications. The crystal caves, Cross continued, apparently oblivious to the growing fear in his audience. The hologram changed to show a mining operation deep underground. Massive machines carved tunnels through solid rock, and conveyor systems moved tons of ore with mechanical precision. Enemy ambush in a mining facility. My unit was separated and surrounded. No weapons, no communication, no backup. Just me and a few thousand tons of mining equipment. The recording showed Cross working with machines the size of buildings, industrial excavators, ore processors, and transport systems that could move mountains. But in his hands, they became something else entirely. Mining equipment is designed to break apart solid rock, Cross said. It works just as well on other things. The hologram showed Cross reprogramming automated mining systems. Massive drill heads that normally carved through stone now turned toward enemy positions. Conveyor belts that usually carried ore instead delivered improvised explosive devices made from mining charges. 31 kills using heavy mining equipment, Cross said, including 14 enemy soldiers who were crushed when I reprogrammed the tunnel support systems to collapse in specific patterns. Commander Hale was rubbing his temples with both hands. David, maybe we should... No, General Tov interrupted. His voice was hoarse now, as if he had been shouting. Let him finish. We need to understand. Cross nodded approvingly. The important thing to remember is that humans do not just use tools. We improve them. We combine them in unexpected ways. We make them work together in systems that their original designers never imagined. The hologram showed Cross's final improvisation. From the crystal caves, he had connected the mining facility's main power grid to its water pumping system, creating an electrical trap that turned the entire underground lake into a weapon. Enemy soldiers who tried to cross the water were electrocuted instantly. 16 more kills when they tried to retreat through the flooded tunnels, Cross said. After that, the remaining enemy forces surrendered without further resistance. He turned off the holographic projector and looked around the table at the 3 alien commanders. Their expressions ranged from horrified fascination to barely controlled panic. "89 confirmed kills with improvised weapons," Cross repeated. "But those are just the ones I had to make from available materials. The really impressive numbers come from situations where I did not have any materials at all." General Tov's voice was barely a whisper. 34 kills with no weapons. "Exactly," Cross said, and his smile was like looking into the mouth of a volcano. "Would you like to hear about those?" Space Station Meridian had been quiet for 6 hours. Too quiet. Cross moved through the darkened corridors like a shadow, his boots making no sound on the metal floor. The emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and black, turning the familiar passages into something from a nightmare. The holographic display showed the alien commanders what had happened that day. Enemy boarding parties had taken control of the station's main sections. They had cut power to life support systems and were systematically hunting down the remaining human crew members. Cross had been separated from his unit during the initial assault. No weapons, no communication, no backup. 34 confirmed kills with no weapons at all, Cross said, his voice eerily calm in the silent war room. Just human anatomy knowledge and millions of years of evolution. General Tov's breathing had become labored. His reptilian features showed an emotion that might have been dread. "What do you mean by anatomy knowledge?" The hologram zoomed in on Cross as he crouched in a maintenance shaft, studying his first target. The enemy soldier was 8 feet tall with thick natural armor plating and arms like tree trunks. By every measure of physical strength, the alien should have been able to tear Cross apart without effort. "Different species have different weak points," Cross explained as if discussing the weather. "Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to study our prey, learn their habits, and exploit their vulnerabilities. When you understand how something is built, you know how to take it apart." The recording showed Cross dropping silently from the maintenance shaft. He landed behind the enemy soldier and struck with surgical precision at a joint between armor plates. The alien went down instantly, paralyzed by damage to its neural pathway. "Nerve clusters," Cross said matter-of-factly. "Every species has them. Usually protected, but there are always gaps in natural armor. Humans learned to find those gaps when we were still hunting animals 10 times our size with nothing but sharp sticks." Captain Nira's feathers were trembling. "You killed an armored warrior with your bare hands." "I disabled his motor functions with pressure applied to specific nerve points," Cross corrected. "Death came from oxygen deprivation when his respiratory system shut down. Much quieter than a direct kill, and it took him several minutes to understand what was happening." The hologram shifted to show Cross moving through the station's hydroponics bay. Massive tanks of water and growing plants created a maze of hiding spots and blind corners. Perfect hunting ground for a human who knew how to use the environment. "Humans are ambush predators," Cross continued. "We do not charge at our enemies like berserkers. We study them. We learn their patterns. We wait for the perfect moment to strike." The recording showed Cross tracking a group of enemy soldiers through the garden area, but he was not following them directly. Instead, he was moving parallel to their path, staying hidden while learning their movement patterns and communication habits. "Pack hunting," Cross explained. "Even when alone, humans think like pack hunters. We identify the leader, separate the weak ones from the group, and eliminate threats in order of priority." The hologram showed Cross making his move. He struck from above, dropping from a water recycling pipe onto the rearmost enemy soldier. The attack was swift and silent. The alien went down without making a sound. "Chokehold applied to the carotid artery," Cross said clinically. "Cuts off blood flow to the brain. Unconsciousness in 8 seconds, brain death in 4 minutes if pressure is maintained. This particular species has a secondary circulatory system, so I had to maintain pressure for 6 minutes to be certain." Lieutenant Rex made a sound like grinding metal. His compound eyes were reflecting the holographic light in patterns of extreme distress. "You strangled him." "I applied controlled pressure to vital circulation points until biological function ceased," Cross said with the same tone he might use to describe changing a light bulb. "The technique is very old. Humans developed it before we invented metal tools." The scene changed to show Cross facing a different kind of enemy. This one was faster than the armored soldier, with multiple limbs and enhanced reflexes. It spotted Cross immediately and charged with the speed of a striking snake. "Some species rely on speed and aggression," Cross said as the hologram showed him dodging the creature's attacks. "They expect their prey to run or freeze in panic. But humans do something else entirely. The recording showed Cross moving with fluid precision, avoiding each attack by the smallest possible margin. He was not trying to escape. He was studying his opponent's movement patterns and timing. "We learn," Cross said simply. "Every attack teaches us something new about the enemy. Speed, reach, favored techniques, recovery time between strikes. Humans process this information constantly during combat." The hologram showed the moment Cross went on the offensive. The enemy creature lunged at him with all four limbs extended, expecting to overwhelm him with sheer aggression. Instead, Cross stepped inside the attack and struck upward with the palm of his hand. "Kinetic energy transfer," Cross explained as the creature collapsed. "The harder they attack, the more force is available to redirect back at them. I used its own momentum to drive bone fragments from its lower jaw into its brain cavity." General Tov was staring at the display with horror and fascination. "You turned its attack against itself." "Basic physics," Cross said with a shrug. "Humans understand leverage, momentum, and energy transfer. We also understand that the strongest creatures often have the most predictable attack patterns." The hologram shifted to show Cross in the station's command center. Multiple enemy soldiers had cornered him in a room with no escape routes. They advanced slowly, confident in their numerical superiority. Cross stood perfectly still in the center of the room, hands at his sides. 7 enemies, Cross said, all armed, all larger and stronger than me, all certain they had won. The recording showed what happened next in slow motion. Cross moved like liquid lightning, flowing between the enemy soldiers with impossible grace. Each movement was precise and economical. No wasted motion, no unnecessary force. Humans fight differently when cornered, Cross explained. We stop thinking about survival and start thinking about taking as many enemies with us as possible. It changes everything about how we move and think. The hologram showed Cross striking pressure points, joint locks, and nerve clusters with mechanical precision. But more than that, it showed him using the enemies against each other. A redirected attack that struck a different opponent. A body thrown into the path of incoming fire. A weapon grabbed and turned on its former owner. Environmental awareness, Cross said as the last enemy fell. Humans process everything in their surroundings as potential tools or weapons. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, even gravity itself becomes part of the fight. Captain Nira's voice was barely audible. You killed 7 armed soldiers with your bare hands. I used their weapons, their positioning, and their assumptions against them, Cross corrected. The room became my ally. Their equipment became my equipment. Their numerical advantage became a disadvantage when they started hitting each other instead of me. The final scene showed Cross in what appeared to be an impossible situation. He was trapped in an airlock with an enemy soldier twice his size. The alien was wearing a full environmental suit with built-in armor plating. Cross wore only his standard uniform. No weapons, no tools, no room to maneuver, Cross said. Just 2 opponents in a space barely large enough for one. The recording showed the enemy soldier activating the airlock's emergency cycle, trying to flush Cross into space. But instead of panicking, Cross moved closer to his opponent. Humans are comfortable with close contact fighting, Cross explained. Most species prefer to keep distance between themselves and their enemies. We evolved differently. Sometimes the safest place to be is right next to the thing trying to kill you. The hologram showed Cross grappling with the armored soldier, but he was not trying to overpower his opponent. Instead, he was working on the environmental suit itself, manipulating seals and connections with knowledge gained from years of wearing similar equipment. Life support systems have failure points, Cross said as his opponent began to struggle more desperately. When you understand how they work, you know how to make them stop working. The enemy soldier's movements became erratic as his suit's atmosphere became contaminated with its own waste products. Cross had reversed several internal systems, turning the armor into a poison chamber. Suffocation in an oxygen-rich environment, Cross said clinically. His suit was still providing air, but I had redirected his carbon dioxide recycling system. He essentially drowned in his own exhalations. The war room was completely silent. The 3 alien commanders stared at Cross with expressions of absolute horror. They were beginning to understand that they were not looking at a warrior in the traditional sense. They were looking at something far more dangerous, a predator that could think. 34 confirmed kills with no weapons, Cross repeated. But even that number does not tell the complete story. Commander Hale leaned forward urgently. David, I think they understand. No, General Tov interrupted. His voice was hollow but determined. He said there were other numbers, Enemies who surrendered or retreated. I want to know about those. Cross's smile returned, and this time it was the smile of something that had never been prey to anything else in the universe. Those numbers, he said softly, are much more interesting. The enemy commander's hands were shaking as he reached for the communication device. Behind him, 3,000 soldiers waited in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming in the harsh light of 2 alien suns. They had trained for months for this assault. They had superior numbers, better equipment, and the element of surprise. But they had just learned that Staff Sergeant David Cross was stationed at the human outpost. They were about to attack. The holographic display in the war room showed intercepted enemy communications from the Battle of Outpost 7. Cross sat perfectly still as alien voices filled the air, their words translated into standard galactic speech by the station's computers. Command, this is Strike Force Alpha. We are prepared to begin the assault, but we have received disturbing intelligence about human defensive capabilities. General Tov's scales had turned almost black with stress. What kind of intelligence? Cross touched the holographic controls, bringing up a series of data files marked with the highest security classifications. Psychological warfare records, he said quietly. The battles you never hear about, the ones that end before they begin. The display showed communication intercepts from dozens of different enemy forces across multiple star systems. All of them contained the same pattern: initial confidence and aggressive planning, followed by growing uncertainty as intelligence reports came in about human defenders. Humans have a reputation, Cross explained. Word travels fast in military circles. Stories get told. Details get exaggerated. Fear spreads faster than any weapon ever invented. Captain Nira's voice was barely a whisper. What kind of stories? The hologram shifted to show a briefing room filled with insectoid warriors. Their translator was working overtime as they discussed attack plans against a human research station. But as the meeting progressed, their enthusiasm began to fade. Intelligence suggests the human garrison includes veterans from the Mining Colony 7 incident, one of the insect soldiers reported. Confirmed presence of Staff Sergeant Cross. The reaction was immediate. Antennae drooped. Compound eyes lost their aggressive gleam. Several soldiers actually stepped backward from the tactical display. Sir, perhaps we should reconsider our approach, another voice suggested. The mining colony reports indicated that Cross turned their own equipment against them. Our assault vehicles use similar technology. Cross paused the recording and looked around the table at his increasingly uncomfortable audience. Reputation is a weapon that never runs out of ammunition. Every enemy I have killed with improvised weapons becomes a story. Every soldier I have defeated with bare hands becomes a legend. Every victory becomes proof that humans are something other species should avoid fighting. The display showed another intercepted communication, this one from a different star system entirely. Reptilian commanders were planning an attack on a human diplomatic outpost when intelligence reports began filtering in. Human Marines are trained differently than other species, the enemy. Intelligence officer reported. They do not simply fight until they die. They adapt. They learn. They turn everything around them into weapons. Standard siege tactics may not be effective. Lieutenant Rex made that grinding metal sound again. They were afraid before the battle even started. Fear is a rational response to superior predators, Cross said matter-of-factly. Humans have been the apex predator on their homeworld for thousands of years. Other species recognize this on an instinctive level, even when their conscious minds try to deny it. The hologram showed the final communication from that particular enemy force. What had started as a confident assault plan had devolved into a request for massive reinforcements and specialized equipment. The attack was eventually called off entirely when command decided the potential losses outweighed the strategic value of the target. 0 human casualties, Cross noted. The outpost was never even threatened. But the enemy lost time, resources, and morale planning for an attack they were too afraid to carry out. General Tov was gripping the table so hard that his claws were penetrating the metal surface. How many times has this happened? Cross brought up a comprehensive tactical database that made the war room's lights flicker under the processing load. Hundreds of icons appeared in the holographic display, each representing a different military engagement or planned attack. 47 major assaults called off when enemy forces learned of human involvement, Cross said. Scrolling through the data with practiced efficiency, 132 tactical withdrawals when human reinforcements were confirmed to be en route. 208 surrenders before first contact, when enemy commanders decided negotiation was preferable to combat. The numbers hung in the air like physical weights. Captain Nira stared at the display with an expression of dawning horror. She was beginning to understand that humans did not just win battles through superior fighting ability, they won wars by making other species afraid to fight at all. The Silent Wars, Cross continued, bringing up a new section of classified files. Conflicts that ended without a single shot being fired. Territorial disputes resolved through diplomatic negotiation. Trade wars settled through economic agreements. All because the alternative was military action against human forces. The hologram showed a map of the local galactic sector. Red zones indicated areas of active conflict between various alien species. But around human space there was a growing bubble of relative peace and stability. Notice the pattern, Cross said, highlighting the peaceful areas. Species that border human territory have learned to resolve their differences through non-violent means. Not because humans force them to, but because they understand what the alternative would cost them. Lieutenant Rex's compound eyes were reflecting the display in patterns that suggested extreme agitation. You have ended wars without fighting them. We have made fighting us too expensive to be worthwhile, Cross corrected. Humans do not seek conflict, but we are very good at making others decide that conflict with us is not in their best interests. The display showed psychological profiles that human intelligence agencies had compiled on various alien species. Detailed analysis of fear responses, decision-making patterns, and cultural attitudes toward warfare and death. Humans study their potential enemies as carefully as we study our weapons, Cross explained. We know what each species values most. We know what they fear most. We know how to make them believe that attacking us will cost them everything they care about. General Tov's voice was hoarse with strain. You have weaponized fear itself. We have weaponized truth, Cross replied. Every story about human combat effectiveness is based on documented facts. Every reputation is earned through actual performance. The fear is rational because the threat is real. The hologram shifted to show Cross himself in various combat situations. But these were not recordings of battles. They were recordings of psychological operations. Cross speaking to enemy commanders through communication systems. Cross demonstrating human capabilities in carefully controlled situations. Cross simply existing in places where enemies could observe him and draw their own conclusions. Presence, Cross said as the recordings played. Sometimes the most effective weapon is simply being somewhere your enemies can see you. When they know what you are capable of, they make different decisions about how to proceed. The display showed an intercepted enemy report that made all 3 alien commanders physically recoil. It was a detailed analysis of human combat techniques, compiled by enemy intelligence services and distributed to their military forces. Warning: human Marines display adaptation capabilities that exceed normal parameters. For known sentient species, the report began, standard combat doctrine may be insufficient for engagements involving human forces. Recommend extreme caution and overwhelming numerical superiority. The report continued with specific recommendations that revealed just how much enemy forces had learned about human capabilities. Avoid close combat at all cost. Maintain maximum distance during engagements. Do not allow humans access to any equipment or materials that could be weaponized. Retreat immediately if humans demonstrate improvisation or adaptation during combat. They have turned us into bogeymen, Captain Nira said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and revulsion. They have accurately assessed the threat level we represent, Cross said. The fact that their accurate assessment resembles mythology is not our fault. The holographic display showed one final set of communications. Recent intelligence reports from the current conflict zone, where the joint military operation was about to take place. Enemy forces had been planning a major offensive until they learned that human Marines would be part of the defensive force. Assault plans have been modified, the enemy commander reported to his superiors. Recommend delaying primary offensive until human forces can be neutralized or removed from the operational area. How do you neutralize human forces? Came the reply. There was a long pause in the communication before the field commander responded. Unknown. Requesting guidance from Tactical Analysis Division. Cross turned off the holographic projector and looked around the table at the 3 alien commanders. Their expressions had moved beyond fear into something approaching existential dread. "Those are the numbers that matter most," Cross said quietly. "Not the enemies I have killed, but the enemies who decided not to fight at all. Not the battles I have won, but the wars that never started because potential enemies understood what victory against humans would actually cost them." Commander Hale cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should discuss the actual mission parameters now." "Yes," General Tov said, his voice barely audible. "I think we understand enough about human capabilities." Cross smiled that unsettling smile one more time. "Do you? Because I have not told you the most important number yet." The silence that followed was so complete that they could hear the space station's hull creaking as it moved through the vacuum of space. "What number?" Lieutenant Rex asked, though his translator was having difficulty conveying the emotional undertones in his voice. Cross leaned back in his chair and folded his hands together. "The number of conflicts that have been prevented simply because other species know that humans like me exist. The wars that will never happen because potential aggressors understand that victory is not worth the cost." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "That number," Cross said softly, "is impossible to calculate, but it is the most important number in the galaxy." The war room felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved closer during Cross's revelations. General Tov sat hunched in his chair, his massive frame somehow diminished by what he had learned. Captain Nira's feathers remained pressed flat against her body in a permanent display of submission. Lieutenant Rex had not moved his compound eyes from Cross's face, as if afraid that looking away might trigger some predatory response. Commander Hale activated the main tactical display, and suddenly the room filled with data about their actual mission. Star charts, enemy positions, force distributions, and strategic objectives glowed in the air between them. But after what they had just witnessed, the information seemed almost trivial. "Primary objective remains the same," Hale said, his voice carefully controlled. "Joint Task Force assault on enemy stronghold in the Kepler system. Intelligence indicates heavy fortifications and significant defensive capabilities." General Tov made an effort to focus on the tactical information, but his eyes kept drifting back to Cross. "What is our projected casualty rate?" "Initial estimates suggested 30% losses during the primary assault," Hale replied. "However, those projections were made before we understood the full scope of human combat capabilities." Cross studied the tactical display with professional interest. Enemy positions were marked in red, forming defensive rings around a heavily fortified planet. The stronghold controlled 3 major shipping lanes and served as a staging area for raids against civilian targets. "Standard siege tactics," Cross observed. Multiple defensive layers overlapping fields of fire prepared fallback positions. He paused, analyzing the data with the same calm precision he had shown while discussing his kill counts. "They are planning to make us pay for every meter of ground." Lieutenant Rex's antennae twitched nervously. "How would you approach this target?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The 3 alien commanders were asking the human predator how he would hunt their enemies. They wanted to know, but they were also terrified of the answer. Cross touched the tactical controls and the display zoomed in on the enemy fortifications. "The first question is not how to attack. The first question is whether we need to attack at all." Captain Nira leaned forward despite her obvious fear. "What do you mean?" "Watch," Cross said, activating the communication system. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, accessing enemy communication frequencies and broadcasting on multiple channels simultaneously. "Attention enemy forces in the Kepler system," Cross said, his voice carrying clearly through the transmission. "This is Staff Sergeant David Cross of the Human Marine Corps. I am transmitting my service record and combat history to your Tactical Analysis Division. You have 1 hour to review this information and contact me for surrender negotiations." He ended the transmission and leaned back in his chair. "Now we wait." General Tov stared at him in disbelief. "You expect them to surrender based on a radio message?" "I expect them to do a cost-benefit analysis," Cross replied. "They know we are coming. They know I am part of the assault force. They know what fighting humans actually means. Smart commanders make smart decisions." The communication system remained silent for 17 minutes. Then it crackled to life with an incoming transmission from the enemy stronghold. "This is Commander Vrex of the Kepler Defense Force," a harsh voice said through the translator. "We have reviewed your transmitted records. We require clarification on several points." Cross activated the reply channel. What kind of clarification, Commander? Your improvised weapon statistics. Are these numbers accurate? Did you actually kill 31 enemy soldiers using modified mining equipment? Confirmed, Cross said simply. Crystal Caves incident, Verdant sector. Would you like tactical details? There was a long pause before the enemy commander responded. That will not be necessary. What are your terms for our surrender? The silence in the war room was profound. General Tov's jaw had dropped open, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Captain Nira made small choking sounds. Lieutenant Rex's compound eyes were reflecting the tactical display in patterns that suggested complete system overload. Standard terms, Cross replied through the communication system. Evacuation of all defensive positions, surrender of weapons and military equipment, repatriation of civilian prisoners. Your forces will be treated according to galactic military conventions. Agreed, came the immediate reply. We will begin evacuation procedures within the hour. Commander Vrex out. Cross turned off the communication system and looked around the table at his stunned colleagues. Estimated casualty rate for this approach, 0%. Commander Hale was staring at the tactical display in amazement. They surrendered. The entire defensive force, without a single shot being fired. Logical decision, Cross said with a shrug. They had read my service record. They understood what their casualties would be if they chose to fight. They chose survival over pointless heroism. General Tov found his voice after several false starts. This is what you meant about enemies who decided not to fight. Exactly. Cross highlighted several sections of the tactical display. Noticed that their defensive positions were actually quite good. If they had been facing a conventional assault force, they probably would have inflicted significant casualties before being defeated. But they were not facing a conventional force. They were facing humans. Captain Nira's voice was barely above a whisper. How often does this happen? Cross brought up his personal mission statistics, displaying them alongside the tactical information. 63% of my assigned operations end in enemy surrender before combat begins. 21% end in enemy withdrawal without engagement. Only 16% result in actual fighting. The numbers were staggering. Lieutenant Rex was making rapid calculations with his internal processors. You have ended more conflicts through reputation than through violence. Violence is expensive, Cross explained. It costs time, resources, and lives. Reputation is much more efficient. One well-documented battle can prevent a dozen future conflicts. One demonstrated capability can make enemies choose negotiation over warfare. The tactical display updated as enemy forces began their evacuation procedures. Transport ships lifted off from the planet's surface, carrying soldiers and equipment away from positions they had spent months preparing to defend. This is why humans are the most feared species in the galaxy, Cross continued, watching the evacuation with professional satisfaction. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest or the most numerous. Because we are the most efficient. We find the path of least resistance to our objectives, and that path usually involves making our enemies understand that resistance is futile. Commander Hale was updating mission parameters in real time as enemy positions emptied. Estimated mission time reduced from 6 weeks to 6 hours. Projected casualties, 0. Resource expenditure, minimal. General Tov shook his massive head slowly. We came here expecting to plan a battle. Instead, we witnessed the end of a war. Not the end, Cross corrected. The prevention. There is a difference. When you end a war, people have died and resources have been destroyed. When you prevent a war, everyone goes home alive and nothing is wasted except the time it took to make the enemy understand reality. The communication system activated again. This time it was their own command structure, requesting updates on mission status and casualty reports. Commander Hale responded with barely controlled amazement in his voice. Mission accomplished. Enemy forces have surrendered without resistance. No casualties. Repeat, no casualties. The voice from command was equally stunned. Confirmed 0 casualties? How is this possible? Hale looked at Cross, who nodded permission. Staff Sergeant Cross contacted enemy forces directly and provided them with accurate assessment of their tactical situation. They made the logical decision to surrender, rather than face the consequences of armed resistance against human forces. Understood, Command replied after a long pause. Stand by for new mission assignments. Apparently there are several other situations that could benefit from similar Diplomatic solutions. Cross smiled, but this time it was not the unsettling expression he had worn earlier. This was the smile of a professional who took satisfaction in a job well done efficiently and without unnecessary complications. "Any questions about human combat doctrine?" he asked the alien commanders. Captain Nira found her voice first. "Just one. You mentioned earlier that you are considered average for human Marines. Is that true?" Cross considered the question seriously. "In terms of combat statistics, yes. There are human soldiers with higher kill counts and more dramatic victories. In terms of psychological operations, I am probably slightly above average. Humans are naturally good at understanding what motivates other species to make specific decisions." Lieutenant Rex made a sound like escaping steam. "If you are average, what are your exceptional soldiers like?" "You do not want to know," Commander Hale said quickly. "Trust me on this. Some knowledge is too dangerous for peace of mind." Cross stood up and gathered his equipment. "The important thing to remember is that humans prefer not to fight at all. We are very good at violence, but we are even better at making violence unnecessary. Today's mission is a perfect example. Everyone achieved their objectives without anyone dying. That is the ideal outcome from a human perspective." General Tov struggled to his feet, his legs still unsteady from the revelations of the past few hours. "I understand now why other species fear you. But I also understand why they respect you." "Fear and respect are not the same thing," Cross said as he headed toward the door. "Fear makes enemies. Respect makes allies. Humans learned long ago that allies are more valuable than corpses." He paused at the doorway and looked back at the three alien commanders. They were still staring at the tactical display, watching enemy forces complete their orderly withdrawal from positions they had been prepared to defend to the death. "One final lesson," Cross said quietly. "The most dangerous human is not the one who wants to fight you. It is the one who knows they do not need to fight you to win." The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the alien commanders alone with their thoughts and a new understanding of what it meant to be allies with the human race. In the tactical display, the last enemy transport lifted away from the planet's surface. The mission was complete. The war was over before it had begun, and somewhere in the galaxy, other potential enemies were already learning about what had happened in the Kepler system. They were adding this incident to their files about human capabilities. They were revising their assessment of what it might cost to fight against the species that had turned warfare itself into a tool of peace. The legend of humanity continued to grow, one prevented battle at a time.